Hello, you're watching TelecomTV. It's day one of the third annual Edgenomics Summit. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV, and coming up now is our panel discussion on whether or not the Edge is finally delivering new revenue streams for telcos. The Edge is becoming strategically important for service providers, but is it actually driving new revenue? Where are the new markets and growth potential for telcos? Well, joining us on the programme to address some of these key issues are Beth Cohen, SDN Product Strategies at Verizon, Rolf Eberhardt, Head of Orchestration with the Communications Technology Group at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and Francis Haysom, Principal Analyst for Appledore Research. Hello, everyone. Very good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in today's discussion. Now, first question I'd like to ask is, what do the telcos hope to achieve from their Edge investments? Where's the revenue coming from, or rather, where might it be coming from? And Beth, as our telco guest today, perhaps we could start with hearing your views.
Happy to talk about that. So there's a number of revenue streams we're looking at developing, and we've started pulling in those revenue streams. But obviously there was a huge investment over the last couple of years into Edge, and more specifically 5G and C-band and some of the other newer telco technologies. So I would say the revenue streams are coming in from sort of two main places. One is on the consumer side. So we're looking to expand our fixed wireless access, which means that we can penetrate markets that we have not traditionally been in, outside of our traditional footprint in the Northeast of the United States. But we are also expanding revenue opportunities on the enterprise side, in the commercial space, with MEC and private MEC and other types of Edge use cases for our enterprise and mid-market customers as well. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and we're starting to realize revenues in both areas, which I guess is the good news.
Yep, that is the good news. Thanks very much, Beth. And Francis, what are you seeing from the industry as a whole? Is it good news? Where might these Edge investments realize revenues?
I think we really need to sort of separate the investments into two sides, one of which is investments in what the telcos have traditionally done, which is things like the RAN, whether it's for mass market broadband, mobile broadband, or whether it's in terms of new areas like fixed wireless access, which fundamentally is a replacement for fixed access. So I think there are obviously large investments in making that a case. I think in the other area, which is using Edge for other applications beyond those traditional ones, I think the jury is very much out. And in fact, I think it's largely driven by a sort of $60 million question, which is how does a CSP make money from what is not its traditional business, or an area where it does not traditionally have core skills in that one. So I think just I think it's very important to sort of push the two halves apart. We've got very clear investment in what a telco does today and what its natural ambition would be. In the other area, in terms of the wider area, I think we're very patchy. We're still very we still have some way to go in terms of making a clear case for why the telco owns the Edge, as opposed to maybe a hyperscaler owning the Edge, or even an SI working directly with a private enterprise owning the Edge.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. There's obviously some very challenging questions that we as an industry need to ask ourselves still. If I could stay with you though, Francis, because I'd also like to ask whether or not any particular enterprise sectors are driving new revenue streams, Edge revenue streams for telcos, and what are you seeing as perhaps the most relevant use cases right now?
I think there are a number of very strong use cases. I think it really varies, not just by varies by country. Really, sort of the focus of the country is often influencing that. So you're seeing a really quite strong jump into, say, manufacturing in countries like Germany and Japan in terms of telcos supporting manufacturing industry in terms of better using both the connectivity through 5G or 4G, often in some cases, and the edge capability that would help in that area. Slightly outside of enterprises, but related. I think you're seeing quite strong push for gaming applications, really as an enhancement of the gaming experience on a highly distributed network. So countries that typically there you're seeing a lot more emphasis in countries that are quite widely dispersed or rural. So there've been a number of examples of edge use in terms of gaming, say in the Midwest US as well. So I think you're seeing some emphasis there. I think it's also worth just being really clear about that there are many edges, and some of these edges that I'm now talking about are very distinctly different. So if you look at something like Germany, T-Mobile, for example, has been opening up 5 or 6 data centers to service the whole of Germany in effect for its edge application. But it's a very different thing than, say, a far edge application, which for example, the vRAN or the or maybe some of the exciting new use cases that are often seen in terms of transport, etc. So I think the investment is being done at a level which is not as far edge as often some of the exciting use cases are, and the challenge there for the telcos is that quite often overlaps with where the hyperscalers are. 4 or 5 regional data centers in Germany isn't that much distinct from Amazon's presence in Germany as well, or Azure's presence in Germany.
Yeah, thanks very much, Francis. And Beth, you'd like to come in on this question as well?
I would. So there's a number of use cases, and again, I think Francis is right. It is country specific or region specific. But one of the strongest use cases I know that Verizon's been involved in is the not so much gaming, but the entertainment and the immersive experience. As you know, in the United States, football or American football is very big. And so we've been involved in a number of places where everybody in the stadium gets 5G and gets this totally immersive experience, and I suspect that's going to be happening, with football in Europe and in Asia as well. So I know we've wired up whole stadiums with this stuff. So there's definitely great interest on the entertainment. Gaming, of course, but also streaming and other content delivery type use cases. So, it definitely will be more as the infrastructure rolls out and becomes more embedded, and people have converted to the phones that support that. I actually just 2 weeks ago got my first 5G phone. So I'm already experiencing that improved performance.
So there's obviously use cases there. There's obviously interest. Rolf, what are you seeing from your perspective?
It really depends on the value chain. If you have an end customer, and those are the guys who count. If the end customer has a business case which is infrastructure driven, the edge story is likely to run through an infrastructure provider and then subsequently maybe to a CSP down the line along the value chain. If the initial request is coming in as a connectivity ask, for example, he needs to have private 5G. Then you will have a logical counterpart in the CSP. And if the end customer again, is interested in digital transformation, he is most likely to go to his ISV or to a system integrator who will then be fronting the telcos and the infrastructure provider to build the edge. So your question really depends on how is the value chain going to be built, and then who is or where is the CSP going to be within this value chain.
Oh, yeah, good point, Rolf. It's, you're absolutely right. Where is the CSP in that value chain? Well, and Rolf, if I can also ask you a follow-up question here, because we've been covering Edge for a number of years now, and sometimes it feels like there's a lack of acceleration, perhaps. Can I ask if there's anything holding back the market? Is for instance, lack of Edge interconnect? Are there factors that might be holding back our progress?
Well, we are very good at creating hype. I guess that's the number one, maturity level which we have in our industry. And so the edge hype, after having gone all the way up, we're now moving down a little bit, and we're now coming into a phase of, realizing what do we actually need. If you look at it, there's been lots of smaller companies, startups, which have been developing applications around this space. I expect there's going to be a consolidation happening now. And yes, you're right there. If you would look at it from the outside, you say, okay, is there a hype around? I think it's calmed down a little bit. However, if I go to in HP to my enterprise customer colleagues, we have a lot of asks, from the B2B sector on digital transformation and how to help this moving forward. So there is a huge ask for this kind of activity. Now, in particular, with COVID slowly petering off, we can move into restarting digital transformation within the B2B sector. It's going to come for sure. It's, as I said before, depending on the value chain, how are you going to address the digital transformation problem? Who is going to be leading into this conversation?
Thank you, Rolf. Francis, I'll come to you in a moment, but first of all, I'll come across to Beth. Are you seeing any factors here that might be holding back the market?
I think there's a number of factors. For one thing, the standards have been pretty slow in coming, particularly around the network slicing standards, which obviously gives a boost to more efficiently using the available new bandwidth. And obviously it's a huge investment. Just in terms of the infrastructure. And I think there's another factor is that it's a complex ecosystem, far more complex than, a telco building out its 4G, because we've now added the hyperscalers infrastructure as well. And, and the hyperscalers and the telcos don't traditionally work together very well. And, we've done some work in that area around wavelength, for example, and Microsoft Azure Edge. But there's still work to be done in terms of providing that ecosystem, as Rolf refers to build out those applications. I've actually been rather surprised at how few new startups there are in this space that are addressing this space. So it's not even clear to me that we're ready for consolidation, because I don't think we have a huge number of startup companies that are working in this area yet. So I still think we're pretty early on. I think the telcos recognize that it takes years to build out this infrastructure. So we started, I'd say, a little early. So we're technology looking for a use case, but that's less and less true now, and it's becoming more clear. But I think over the next couple of years, it will become, it will be embraced, but it's just starting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Beth. And as you say, it is a complex ecosystem, and it's only going to get larger. Francis, what's your analysis here?
I think one of the challenges for us as telcos is we talk a lot about edge and we talk a lot about 5G as well. But I'm unaware of any enterprise that sat out there saying, I need edge and I need 5G. Their problems are very different. Their problems are specific to manufacturing. Their problems are specific to retail. The list goes on. They all have very different needs. And when they're looking at things like edge, often they're not. The competition to edge is fundamentally two things. One of which is the enterprise does it themselves, which is their traditional model of putting IT in their own data centers, or the model is to put it with the hyperscalers who've become very efficient at delivering very efficient compute and storage, etc. So edge somehow needs the telcos edge selling to those enterprises somehow needs to sit between them and make a business case, and that is not a business case that's made on low latency or whatever. It's on, is it cheaper to do things operationally than in say a client data center? Is it a high performance application that can't deal with the latency to the cloud? And so I think a lot of it, I think we're in danger of always seeing the single use cases or looking for the single use cases that will make the business case. But I think in a lot of cases, it's how do we package things we already do, which might include compute in the edge, but also connectivity, but package them in a way that says, actually, I'm going to reduce your operational cost to run your own data center versus running it on my data center, or I'm going to secure you for data sovereignty issues, or I'm going to allow you to disaggregate something that is currently massively aggregated in your site and spread that across the cloud. Those are the sort of applications that I think we need to be thinking a little bit more about, and less about this is an apple orchard farmer that is doing a specific thing, because the telcos need to do thousands of these use cases, all subtly different, and to deliver them at scale. It's not about one single use case that will make a telco more preferential at the edge versus an enterprise or a hyperscaler.
Yeah, so there's families of use cases, I guess, but when it comes down to it, individual customers, customer by customer, they've all got their own specific needs that telcos, if they want to be in this market, have to address. Thanks, Francis. Beth, if I can come back over to you and pick up on what you were saying earlier about, we as telcos may have come in a little bit early into this market, but we're hearing the need now. We're seeing things pick up. Are we seeing a strategic shift in edge investments from telcos? Is the private 5G network opportunity or the vRAN uptake changing edge priorities?
So I have seen some of that. We invested in the public infrastructure first, and as of January, we rolled out 5G availability to So what was the press release said 91 million people in the United States. So that's about a third of the country. It's not too shabby. So we've done a lot of that work. Certainly from what I've seen, and I'm on the enterprise side of the house, so I don't necessarily see the consumer side, we are putting more resources in developing the private MEC, private 5G, than we were before. And I think it was because we just weren't ready for it. And our customers weren't ready, as Francis noted. It's a solution looking for a problem. But I think that our customers are now coming around to saying, oh, wait, I do have something that does make sense for me to do a private MEC solution. We're seeing a lot of interest from customers, certainly in manufacturing, oil and gas, mining, campus, just large office parks that have campuses, those types of solutions where you want to keep, it's not so much low latency, but there's a lot of data that needs to go, you don't want to ship a whole lot of data back into the cloud. So that's network efficiency, I would call it. So yeah, I'd say there's definitely more. I wouldn't say it's 100% shifted, but there's definitely more work being done right now on the private side of the house, which wasn't true a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Beth. And Francis, as Beth said, it does seem that there's more emphasis being placed by telcos, telco edge, on private networks, or perhaps it's more clarity from telcos as to where the revenue opportunities are. What do you think?
Yeah, I think some of it is going to repeat what I said before. I think the issue with private networks is making that business case for why a public network or a public network provider and their SI capability is a better route to delivering a private network versus the alternative, which is an enterprise delivers their own private network, or an SI delivers a private network for them. And again, I think in that case, it's going to be things like network slicing, the ability to say, well, actually, a private network slice is higher security, has lower operational cost than you developing your own private network, say in a factory. It's going to be those type of conversations, because that is what matters to the enterprise. Just a small point on the vRAN. I think vRAN is very interesting. It certainly drives edge use cases, but fundamentally, it's about delivering a RAN. It's just a slightly different way of delivering a RAN at the moment. So I think we need to be really careful. It doesn't really it uses edge, but it doesn't really shift the needle in terms of enterprise use cases or things like that. Or it could be an enabling of it, but it doesn't really shift the edge economics.
So it's not a specific revenue generator there, unlike, say, private 5G networks. Great, thanks, Francis. Rolf, what about you? What's your view on whether or not we're seeing a strategic shift in focus from the telcos and perhaps looking more at private 5G networks?
Private 5G is now coming. It's definitely on the agenda. The question, however, is are we or is the CSP approaching it the right way? Again, this high technology affinity is probably not the thing which the end customer is caring for. If I were to be doing an investment as a product manager on the CSP side, I would focus on having a portfolio of NAS, of network as a services, which are combinations of Wi-Fi, of private 5G, or also 4G, with slicing capabilities in and out, so that I can offer the bouquet of features to the system integrator, to the B2B customer himself, so that they can then pick and choose whatever is required. Because you see from the end customer perspective two segments. You have the one, if you go into manufacturing, they're putting in their robot. This robot's going to have a 5G modem. Boom, it's clear. You're going to be private 5G plus slicing, so that you get the latency and related requirements to it. But if you go to a more general purpose environment like the campus or healthcare, there you might have a combination thereof, where 5G, 4G, 5G Wi-Fi handover becomes relevant, because the application is flying in on a chopper, and then it lands at the hospital, and then you have to have a handover without interruption of your monitoring data coming from the healthcare equipment into the surgery location. That's why I think we will be successful if we offer as many different features as easily consumable as possible, and that's when investment will be picking off.
Interesting. Thanks very much for that, Rolf. Is it too early to start scrutinizing revenues, perhaps? I mean, Francis, we're talking about revenues here, but are we still in an investment and build-out stage with Edge?
In simple answer to your question, I think we are definitely too early to do that one, and I think separating out the two Edge, we are definitely making investment and build in terms of telco Edge for telcos. I think in terms of the wider picture, there are certainly early investments being made, but I think in terms of analyzing any global trend in that area, I think we're far too early.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. And I guess that's probably the same for you too, Beth. We are still looking at building out and investing.
I would agree with you, although one thing that we are very much looking forward to is the increased revenues with fixed wireless access. The United States has recently passed a bill that allows for build out of broadband, and I use that term loosely, to rural areas and underserved areas. So that's an area that I think Verizon and others are very much targeting for fixed wireless access because those areas are currently served with antique copper for the most part. Some of it put in, over 100 years ago, and in DSL, which is old technology and certainly not fast. So fixed wireless access, I think that's, although the revenues are just starting, that's definitely an area that I would say is going to be very much of a growth area over the next few years.
Great, thanks, Beth. Right, I've got a final question for you all. Rolf, perhaps I could start by asking you, how important is the app developer community here in driving growth in the telco edge services sector? And the perennial question we keep asking here is, how can they be better engaged?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess we all remember the times, pre-iPhone, when we desperately tried to build development platforms for applications on mobile phones. Didn't really work out, did it? Why? Because we had an ecosystem coming from Google and from Apple, which was just perfect, easy to use, easy to develop applications, and hence this market disappeared into it. Now, if you look at it from the B2B application perspective, there are two segments. There is the application developer who has a strong relationship with a hyperscaler, and hence they're making use of the libraries and the infrastructure provided by them, and there you have a very tight lock-in. Hence, again, the value chain will be hyperscale or application developer, hyperscaler, and then subsequently the telcos along the path. You'll have the other side, which is going to be the ISVs who will be building independently of hyperscalers, and they are keen on getting, as again I'm repeating myself, a network as a service opportunity so that they can easily provide, for example, 5G in a digital twin scenario without all the complexity, without the lock-in, without the technical difficulties of having to choose, the appropriate connectivity tech. So half of the market is done. The other half is going to be driven by the ISVs, and we need to make sure that to be successful in this market, we can cover all of them in their subjective areas of the value chain.
Great, thank you, Rolf. And you've come back to the value chain again, and I think it's very important that we recognise that and we recognise telco's place. Francis, what are you seeing? Because the app developers are out there. How well are telcos engaging? What can we do better?
I think, to reiterate the point, app developers and companies are the lifeblood of making Edge a success. Honestly, we know some use cases at the moment, but the reality is the use cases that will make a success of Edge, we simply don't know. We can have an idea of what the components of them will be, but we simply don't know. And so the effort that the industry can make to make themselves easily consumable by application developers is the way in which they will have success. Because of 1,000 use cases for Edge, 999 will fail, but one will be extremely successful and will generate the revenue to make Edge and the comms associated with it a success. I think one of the things I've noticed in the industry is that when we talk about things like network slicing, we're still at the level of kind of here's one network slice that we have orchestrated on a network. The challenge for Edge is, can I demonstrate 1,000 slightly different orchestrations of slightly different network slices in combination with Edge? And when one of those is a success, can I scale it from 1 to 1 million in a very short order? We're a long way away from that. And a lot of that is not to do with the technology. The technology really does exist at the moment. The issues are to do with operational environments and the way in which we expose those operational environments to the outside world. we need something where we can literally dial up a network slice on demand for a short period. It can be raised, it can be torn down, it can be used by an application. We're not there yet. We don't have the operational processes or the operational scale in terms of orchestration to support that at the moment. And that will be a critical thing in terms of telcos taking the value versus somebody else taking the value.
Sure. Thanks very much, Francis. And Beth, are we making it easy enough and also attractive enough for the app developers?
Well, traditionally app developers don't think of telcos as their partners. So, a lot of, and in fairness, the hyperscalers don't give them any tools that really connect to the networks. And I've been saying this for a while. App developers, they don't necessarily need to have deep knowledge about networks, but they certainly need to have the tools that allow them to test their applications and use their applications more efficiently over a distributed network. And those tools just don't exist. Certainly within the developer ecosystem, they, obviously the telcos have those tools. And I think Francis was picking up on something, which is, the telcos traditionally are very kind of a closed ecosystem, and they sort of think of themselves as, well, we're delivering transport and we're very efficient at it, but telcos don't traditionally pay much attention to the applications that are running on top of these infrastructures or the network infrastructures. And I think there needs to be more integration between, how the network works and how the application works. Network slicing is one way to do it. SD-WAN is another. And we're starting intelligent networks as a third way. All of these are still, I would say, not fully mature. Some of them are more mature than others, but there's not really full integration between the networks and the developers and the applications, and that really needs to happen. I think that the telcos certainly can step up and be smarter about providing tools to the developers. I don't see the hyperscalers doing that, and they certainly haven't yet. So, jury's still out, but I think the telcos do need to have a stronger voice in this ecosystem than they have traditionally.
Thanks, Beth. So there's more we can do, but there's also, we can be more proactive as telcos. Well, look, we must leave it there for now. Thank you all very much. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. Thanks for taking part today and sharing your views. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our TelecomTV Summit on Edgenomics, then don't forget to send us your questions and we'll try and answer them in our live after show program, and that's later today. And please take part in our online poll, which you can find below this video player window next to the Q&A app. This is the question we are asking, along with the 5 multiple choice answers, and we'll review the votes during the after show. Don't forget to take a look at the other panel discussions in this year's Edgenomics Summit. But for now, though, thank you for watching and goodbye.